In a busy open-air marketplace on the shores of Lake Tanganyika, hundreds of Burundians gather under the hot sun to trade bananas, cassava, and other meager produce. This small East African nation, roughly the size of Maryland, is home to over 13 million people and is often labeled the poorest country in the world. For most families here, daily life is a struggle for survival. Approximately 80% of Burundi's population lives in poverty, and the average person earns less than $500 a year. As evening falls, many villages go dark. Only about 1 in 10 people has access to electricity in Burundi.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Burundi, I guess.
It is a country where hardship is ubiquitous, a place once ranked the least happy nation on earth.
Whoever wants to transport goods in Burundi does so by bike. Distances are short. Burundi is one of the smallest countries in Africa.
We are going to delve into the grim reality of Burundi's situation, exploring its economic collapse, social struggles, health and education crises, and the governance challenges that have trapped it in extreme poverty. Welcome to the world of research. Welcome to the large family of WIN, Wisdom in Narrations. Burundi's poverty is rooted in a painful history of conflict and tragedy. After gaining independence from Belgium in 1962, the nation suffered decades of ethnic violence and civil war. Tensions between the Hutu majority and Tutsi minority led to waves of massacres and 2 episodes widely deemed genocides, one in 1972 and another in 1993. A brutal civil war from 1993 to 2005 killed around 300,000 people, devastating communities and the economy. Countless others fled as refugees to neighboring countries during the fighting. This history of bloodshed shattered infrastructure and scarred an entire generation. Peace agreements in the early 2000s finally ended the war and brought relative stability. In 2005, former rebel leader Pierre Nkurunziza was elected president, ushering in a period of hope. However, over time his government grew increasingly authoritarian, marked by political repression and corruption.
People in Burundi celebrate the news an army general has attempted to carry out a coup against the country's leader.
In 2015, Nkurunziza's bid for a third term sparked a new political crisis with violent crackdowns. Protests and a failed coup followed. Western donors, alarmed by human rights abuses, cut off aid to the government. The European Union suspended financial assistance in 2016. This isolation further strained Burundi's fragile economy. Nkurunziza remained in power until his sudden death in 2020. His successor, Evariste Ndayishimiye, promised reforms and a fresh start. The 2020 elections and peaceful transfer of power opened a new window of hope, according to the EU, which resumed aid in 2022. Yet, progress has been tentative. Burundi today remains haunted by its past. The legacy of war and ethnic division still weighs heavily, and many families are rebuilding lives from the ruins of conflict.
The fuel shortage is taking a toll on the entire economy. In May 2025, inflation hit 45%, forcing many Burundians to adapt. At the Kotebu market, some products have simply become unaffordable.
Burundi's economy is in shambles, earning it the unenviable title of the world's poorest nation. By some measures, Burundi has the lowest per capita income on the planet. In 2020, its GDP per person, adjusted for purchasing power, was only about $771. Compare that to over $60,000 in the United States. Even in 2025, GDP per capita remains around just $1,000 in PPP terms. In simple dollar terms, an average Burundian earns under $1.50 a day. This extreme poverty is pervasive and deep-rooted. One major challenge is that over 80% of Burundians rely on subsistence agriculture for survival. Most families farm small plots of land, often about 1 acre each on average, growing just enough bananas, beans, or cassava to eat and sell at local markets. With such tiny farms and a rapidly growing population, many do not have enough land or food to sustain themselves. Deforestation and soil erosion have further degraded the farmlands. Agriculture remains largely primitive and rain-dependent. When the rains fail or floods hit, harvests collapse. Climate shocks like droughts or flooding can instantly plunge millions into hunger. Burundi's narrow economic base is also vulnerable to fluctuations in its few cash crops, chiefly coffee and tea, which suffer from price swings and aging plantations. The country has some untapped mineral deposits, nickel, gold, etc., but mining is minimal due to lack of infrastructure. Being landlocked with limited trade access, Burundi struggles to develop manufacturing or industry. It imports far more than it exports, leading to chronic trade imbalances. In 2024, export earnings covered only 25% of the cost of imports, a huge gap that drains Burundi of foreign currency. The result is constant shortages of fuel, medicine, and other essentials. In recent years, severe fuel shortages have literally brought transportation and industry to a halt. Businesses cannot operate when gasoline pumps run dry. Foreign investment is nearly non-existent. FDI is negligible, as investors are scared off by instability and red tape. The country also faces a currency crisis.
How much can you get for $10 for the unofficial rate and for the official rate?
$1 equal to 2,000?
2,000, yes. And for the unofficial rate? 3,000.
The Burundian franc is officially overvalued, leading to a thriving black market for US dollars. By 2024 to 2025, inflation had surged to around 40%.
Inflation in 40 years.
Drastically raising the price of food and basic goods and crushing the purchasing power of ordinary people. Families that could barely afford one meal a day suddenly find even that slipping out of reach as prices rise. Government finances are in dire straits as well. With a tiny tax base and weak economy, Burundi relies heavily on foreign aid.
No money, just handshake. Yeah. Money.
Before 2015, international aid made up as much as 20 to 25% of Burundi's GDP, effectively propping up the nation. But after the 2015 political violence, many donors withdrew. Aid dropped to just 4% of GDP, creating a gaping hole.
In 2016, the European Union, at that time Burundi's biggest aid donor, suspended all direct funding to the government for ignoring human rights and failing to stop a wave of deadly violence.
The government copes by printing money and taking on debt, which fuels more inflation. Public debt is about 69% of GDP and rising. Meanwhile, corruption and mismanagement siphon off resources that could have built infrastructure or supported farmers.
I tried to start the video right from the airplane and then after at the airport, but I wasn't allowed to film. Camera was restricted. The gentleman was actually wanted a bribe from me. He was like, "Can you give me something?" I said, I don't really have anything for you, but...
Business owners complain of ever-changing rules and officials demanding bribes, making it hard to create jobs. In short, Burundi's economy is caught in a vicious cycle. Poor agricultural output, trade deficits, and weak governance keep the country impoverished, and that very poverty makes it harder to grow out of the crisis. For ordinary Burundians, the statistics of poverty translate into painful daily realities.
The week is almost over and see, we still have stock. People are not buying. We've even reduced prices, but the thing is, people don't have money.
In rural villages, families often eat just 1 or 2 meals a day, typically a paste made from cassava or corn with maybe some beans or green bananas. Meat is a rare luxury. Over 70% of the population struggles to afford food and other essentials. In fact, Burundi has one of the highest levels of hunger in the world. More than half of all children under 5 are chronically malnourished, stunted, due to long-term hunger. This means their growth is permanently impaired. A 3-year-old in Burundi often looks years younger than their age and may face lifelong cognitive and health setbacks from malnutrition. In some areas, mothers routinely skip meals so that their children can eat something at least. The World Food Programme, WFP, reports that 52% of young children are chronically malnourished. One Burundian health worker explained that many people don't even realize what malnutrition is. People know they are hungry, but they don't necessarily realize that they are acutely malnourished, she said. WFP and other agencies run feeding centers where underweight kids and pregnant women receive fortified porridge. In one case, a severely undernourished expectant mother weighed just 38 kilograms, 84 pounds, at 4 months pregnant until a feeding program provided daily porridge. By the time she gave birth, she reached 47 kilograms and delivered a healthy baby. Such interventions save lives, but reach only a fraction of those in need. Nationwide, chronic hunger is a way of life, a silent famine that doesn't always make headlines but grinds down the population. Another challenge is Burundi's explosive population growth. The average woman in Burundi has around 5 children in her lifetime, one of the highest fertility rates globally. This reflects a lack of access to family planning and cultural norms favoring large families, partly as a legacy of losing so many lives in past conflicts. The result is a very young population. About 42% of Burundians are under 15 years old. While children are considered a blessing, the sheer number of young mouths to feed and bodies to clothe puts enormous strain on poor households. Many kids grow up in ragged clothes, and some go barefoot because even flip-flops cost too much. Families often cannot afford school supplies or uniforms for all their children, even if primary school is officially free. Basic infrastructure to support a dignified life is lacking. Clean water and sanitation are scarce in many communities. Women and girls commonly walk long distances to fetch water from streams or communal wells. According to UNICEF, 40% of girls spend over 30 minutes each day just fetching water, time they might otherwise use for school or rest. In the hilly countryside, you will see lines of children carrying yellow jerry cans of water on their heads every morning. Sanitation is another crisis. Fewer than half of Burundians have access to proper toilets, so open defecation and poor hygiene contribute to disease. In crowded urban neighborhoods of Bujumbura, the largest city, or Gitega, the political capital, many families cram into one-room houses with no electricity or running water. Jobs are extremely scarce, so even in cities, many people survive by petty trading, selling fruit by the roadside or charcoal, for example, earning maybe $1 or $2 on a good day. Daily life in Burundi is therefore defined by hardship and resilience. People work incredibly hard just to survive. Farmers till their small plots with hand hoes from dawn to dusk. Mothers improvise ways to feed and care for many children on next to nothing. Community solidarity is strong. Neighbors help each other when they can, knowing everyone is struggling. But the social fabric is under strain. Poverty and unemployment can fuel crime or domestic violence. After years of instability,
a coup has taken place in Burundi.
There's also lingering trauma. Many adults carry memories of violence or time spent in refugee camps.
2 radio stations were burnt down last night.
Widespread poverty, corruption.
He's taking us somewhere.
He says it is prohibited to film here and we can go to jail for that. After taking $50 from our pocket, he gives back our passport and goes away on December 7, 2021.
Instability, authoritarianism, and illiteracy plague Burundi today, as one report starkly noted. These overlapping social ills make it extraordinarily difficult for most citizens to break out of the cycle of destitution.
Health experts say more than 700 people have died of malaria this year in Burundi.
The United Nations says malaria has killed more than 1,800 people in Burundi this year.
Burundi faces a profound health crisis that often goes unseen until it becomes deadly. The country's health indicators are among the worst in the world. Life expectancy at birth is only in the early 60s, around 62 years, which is a stark improvement from the 40s a few decades ago, but still far below the global average. Those who survive infancy often face a lifetime of inadequate medical care. There are very few doctors and nurses to serve the population. Clinics are understaffed and often run out of essential medicines. Preventable and treatable diseases become fatal in Burundi simply because people cannot get timely, quality care. One of the biggest killers is malaria. In Burundi's tropical climate, malaria-carrying mosquitoes are rampant, especially during the rainy seasons. In 2019, the country suffered a massive malaria outbreak. Over 5.7 million infections were recorded. Almost half of the entire population caught malaria that year. The disease killed thousands, mostly young children whose small bodies could not cope with repeated malarial fevers. Even in non-epidemic times, malaria is a constant threat. Families sleep under mosquito nets if they have them, but many do not. Poor rural households sometimes burn dried cow dung at night to smoke out mosquitoes. Clinics frequently run low on anti-malarial drugs, so people resort to traditional herbs or simply endure the fevers. It's a cruel irony that in Kirundi, the local language, there is a saying, "People know they are hungry, but not that they suffer malnutrition." Similarly, many do not realize that recurring fever and weakness is due to malaria, or they accept it as a normal part of life. Other diseases compound the health challenges. Waterborne illnesses like diarrhea and cholera periodically flare up, especially in areas where clean water is lacking. These illnesses hit children the hardest. Diarrhea, for instance, contributes to malnutrition and can be fatal for underweight kids. HIV/AIDS is present, but at a relatively low rate, around 0.9% of adults, compared to some African countries. Nonetheless, it adds strain to families who have to care for sick relatives. Tuberculosis is another concern, often hitting those whose immune systems are weakened by HIV or malnutrition. Meanwhile, maternal and child health statistics highlight how fragile life is for Burundian mothers. The maternal mortality rate is around 392 deaths per 100,000 live births, meaning a Burundian woman has roughly a 1 in 250 chance of dying with each childbirth, one of the highest risks globally. The reasons are many. Women often give birth at home or in undersupplied clinics, sometimes without a skilled doctor. Emergency care for complications like hemorrhage is hard to get in remote areas, and many mothers are themselves physically weak due to poverty. Infant mortality remains high as well. Roughly 1 in 25 babies die before their first birthday, a rate many times worse than in wealthy countries. The healthcare system struggles to respond.
Nk'abo bana indwi rero turafisemo abana babiri bafise ikibazo c'ingwara kwa muganga batubwiye yuko yitwa drepanocytosis. Mu by'ukuri kubaho canke kuvuza abo bana biratugora, uburyo ntabwo bwo kubabeshaho.
Burundi spends very little on health, only around 6 to 8% of GDP, and it shows. Hospitals have crumbling infrastructure. In some provincial clinics, patients have to bring their own bedding and even candles for light at night. Doctors and nurses are concentrated in the city, leaving rural communities in the hands of a few overworked nurses or aides. It's not uncommon for seriously ill patients to be transported on bicycle or by foot for many kilometers to reach a facility with a doctor. During the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, Burundi notably had a lax response. The former president even claimed divine protection and expelled WHO officials, revealing how ill-prepared the health system was for any large-scale health emergency. In Burundi, Illness can be a death sentence for a poor family, not only from the disease itself, but from the costs and burdens that push them deeper into destitution. Improving health outcomes is both an urgent humanitarian need and a key to breaking the cycle of poverty that grips the nation. Education in Burundi is a field of both hard-won progress and ongoing crisis. On one hand, the country has made notable strides in getting more children into school. In 2005, Burundi's government introduced free primary education, which led to an explosion in enrollment. Classrooms that once were half empty filled up with eager students, including many girls and children from poor families who previously couldn't afford fees. Gross enrollment in primary school now exceeds 118%. The rate can top 100% because older kids who had dropped out returned to school. By 2015, the primary school attendance rate reached about 94%, up from 59% in 2004 when fees were still in place. This is a remarkable achievement. Burundi managed to give almost every child at least a chance to start school despite being so poor. However, the quality and continuation of education are where the picture grows bleak. The surge in students was not matched by a surge in resources. Classrooms are overcrowded, with reports of 80 or more students per teacher in some primary classes. Many schools lack basic supplies. It's common to see children sharing tattered textbooks, 3 or 4 to a book, or writing on slates because there are not enough notebooks. In rural areas, schools might be nothing more than mud brick rooms with dirt floors and holes in the roof. When heavy rains come, classes sometimes have to be cancelled because the roof leaks on the few precious books. Teachers are underpaid and overburdened. Despite these conditions, they do their best. Some teachers use creative methods like community-made teaching aids or outdoor lessons under trees when classrooms are full. The toughest statistic is that fewer than half of Burundian children actually complete primary school. Many drop out before the 6th grade. Why? Poverty is a big reason. As children get older, families often need them to work on the farm or earn money. A 12-year-old boy might be sent to herd the cows or help dig rather than finish school. Girls in particular face obstacles. Some are pulled out of school once they reach puberty due to lack of sanitary pads or because of early marriage and pregnancy. For those who do finish primary, secondary education is far from guaranteed. The gross enrollment for secondary school is only about 46%. In other words, less than half of teenagers are in high school. The rest have no formal training beyond basic literacy, if that. This is a huge lost opportunity, as it means the workforce remains largely unskilled. It also perpetuates the cycle of poverty. If young people cannot gain skills or diplomas, they struggle to find any jobs beyond subsistence farming. Learning outcomes are also a concern. Learning poverty is extremely high. By age 10, an estimated 96% of children cannot read and understand a simple text. They might be in school, but with the overcrowding and lack of materials, many are not mastering literacy or math. This ghost of education means even some who finish primary school still have poor reading skills. It's a tragic situation where schooling does not always equal learning. Political and governance problems in Burundi have greatly contributed to its dire condition. The country's leadership and institutions have often done more to exacerbate poverty than to alleviate it. Endemic corruption is a critical issue. Transparency International consistently ranks Burundi among the most corrupt nations in the world. Bribery and misuse of funds drain the meager resources that Burundi has. For example, money meant for public services like health clinics or road repair too often disappears into officials' pockets. Investors have noted that doing business in Burundi is exceedingly difficult due to ever-changing rules and demands for unofficial payments. This corruption stifles entrepreneurship and scares away foreign investment that could create jobs. Furthermore, Burundi's governance has been marked by instability and authoritarian rule for much of its post-independence history. After the civil war, the country had a chance at democratic renewal, but those hopes dimmed as the ruling party, CNDD-FDD, clung tightly to power. Under President Nkurunziza, 2005 to 2020, opposition parties were harassed, and by the 2000s, Burundi had effectively become a one-party state with shrinking space for dissent. The 2015 crisis, when Nkurunziza pushed a controversial third term, illustrated the regime's willingness to use violence to stay in control. Security forces brutally suppressed protests, and there were reports of torture, disappearances, and extrajudicial killings of government critics. Even after Nkurunziza's era, human rights groups say repression continues. For instance, an opposition figure, Augustine Matata, died in custody in 2022 after alleged torture by intelligence agents. Such incidents underscore that the rule of law remains weak. This climate of fear and impunity has real economic costs. When the EU and other donors cut aid after 2015 due to these governance issues, it dealt a heavy blow to Burundi's finances. Aid and cooperation are starting to resume under President Evariste, but the government still faces challenges in human rights, good governance, and rule of law, as the EU noted upon lifting sanctions. Evariste has publicly acknowledged corruption as public enemy number one in Burundi and launched some anti-graft campaigns. There have been a few high-profile dismissals of corrupt officials, which is a positive sign. These steps are building goodwill and could lead to more development assistance flowing in again. However, changing a political culture of patronage and impunity is an uphill battle. Decades of conflict and authoritarian rule have weakened civil society and eroded trust in institutions. Many Burundians feel disconnected from their leaders. For example, local administrators, the face of government for villagers, have a reputation for demanding bribes or favoritism in distributing aid. Until citizens can expect fair treatment and see accountability for officials, it is hard to implement policies effectively on the ground. Governance shortfalls also impact basic security and justice. While the civil war is over, there are still reports of armed groups or ruling party youth wings intimidating people, especially around election times. The judiciary is not fully independent, so ordinary people have little recourse if their rights are violated or land is grabbed by the powerful. Burundi's story is one of immense hardship, a nation burdened by conflict, poverty, hunger, and isolation. We have seen how its economy lies in ruins, with most citizens scratching out a living from the soil and the country ranking at the very bottom of global wealth indicators. We have witnessed the social struggles of its people, children with empty stomachs, mothers sacrificing for their families, and communities coping with the daily trials of extreme poverty. We have explored the health crisis that cuts lives short and the fraught state of education that both inspires hope and reveals profound gaps. And we have confronted the role of governance problems, corruption, and political repression in perpetuating this state of affairs. Why does this tiny nation matter? And why should the world care? Aside from human compassion for the 13 million lives at stake, Burundi's plight is a microcosm of challenges facing many developing countries. It reminds us that peace is fragile and precious. Burundi's violence set it back generations. It shows that without good governance, even massive aid can evaporate with little to show. And it starkly highlights issues like population pressure and environmental stress that much of the globe will grapple with in the coming decades. As we conclude this deep look at Burundi, we are left with a mix of sorrow and cautious optimism. The facts and figures of how poor it is are vivid and heartbreaking, a stark reminder of how unequal our world remains. But beyond the grim rankings and reports, we've gotten a glimpse of human stories, of parents, children, teachers, and leaders in Burundi striving for a life of dignity. Their narrative is still being written. Will Burundi remain at the bottom, or will it rise slowly and defy the odds? The answer depends on choices made today and tomorrow, both by Burundians and by the international community that stands with them. In shedding light on the plight of the world's poorest country, this documentary reminds us that Burundians' dreams are not so different from anyone else's. A full stomach, a safe home, a chance to learn, and a voice in their future. Helping make those dreams a reality is a responsibility and a test, one that concerns us all. Together, the people of Burundi and their partners around the world must break the cycle of poverty and conflict. The task is monumental, but the reward would be even greater: the transformation of the world's poorest country into a place of peace and opportunity. It has been done elsewhere, and it can be done in Burundi. The world will be watching, and hopefully will be moved to act, because the story of Burundi is ultimately a story of our common humanity and how we choose to respond to those most in need. Thanks for watching. I wish you better life, foods, and money. Stay in the Big Wins family.